Kia ora, hello everyone from all over the world. Um, some a friendly time zone, I guess, and we're missing the part of the some part of the people from some part of the world due to the time, but that's okay. That's why we're recording the session, and we are personally, I'm very looking forward to the session today because we're touching on the science communication, which is a very hot topic and which is very necessary for science to get across all over the world in a more lighthearted way, I guess. And this is part of the 2023 webinar series um, brought to you by the HIWeather and Yes community. The power of participation, citizen engagement in weather and climate science and action. So in this webinar series, we will explore the role of citizen science in improving weather-related hazard warnings, increasing public awareness and understanding of weather science. So today, the webinar topic is maps, memes, and meteorology. I don't know if everyone's into memes, but it is a very fun way to get some information across very easily and with a fun way. So in today's digital age, memes have become a universal language capable of conveying complex ideas with humor and creativity. In communicating science, particularly meteorology, our speaker BA today combines the visual impact of maps with the viral nature of memes. It is not an easy thing to do, as there are sacrifices and compromises to be made. But as long as you get your message across, memes can be a non-likely medium of communicating science. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce our speaker, B.A. Racoma today from University of Philippines. So he actually never imagined himself that he will become a scientist one day. Because when he was younger, he wanted to be a rock star or an actor. So that's why he enrolled in voice lessons and theater classes. So that's quite interesting turnout of event. While he did not become an actor or a star, he uses the skills he learned on stage during his younger years to communicate science and to teach environmental science and meteorology in the University of the Philippines. So yeah, looking forward to your talk. I will give the floor to you, BA.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Alicia, for that wonderful introduction. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you can share
hi,
your
everyone.
screen now.
Oh, sure. Okay, let me just. All right. So I'm BA, and this will be a little bit an informal talk, talking about maps, memes, and meteorology. Because usually when I attend the high weather or the yes seminars, it's always very formal, and sometimes I do learn a lot, but it's not for everyone. So I'll try to make this talk for everyone so that everyone can appreciate and understand maps, memes, and meteorology. So here in this figure is just a very simplified map of the Philippines. So just shows the peaks and valleys and then just some little lines. So it's just showing the bare or the essence of my country, the Philippines. So first, let's just talk about maps. So what are maps? I know a lot of us know what maps are. Just for a brief description, these are symbolic and visual representations of space on a flat object. So these include objects, places, geopolitics, geology, culture, everything, anything that you can think about. And when I make maps, I use a lot of data online. So first, I try to take advantage of free and open data, just like the OpenStreetMap data. For example, here I make maps of the Metro Manila road network. So this is the city where I live in, and all of this data is free now. And just download it. And of course, you have to give credit to the contributors. I myself am a contributor of OpenStreetMap. This can be very useful in making your maps. And also, we can make maps using data from international weather organizations. So I saw that WMO is a sponsor of this talk, and I download a lot of data from WMO, especially the weather station data, so the ground station data, which I use to interpolate and then collate and then uh, connect with the different events in the country. And also, since I'm part of the Philippine government and the academy, so I also have access to academic and research data. For example, this is a map of the volcano island in Taal. So this is LiDAR from LiDAR data, and it's very fine and high resolution. And it's also open data, but since I know the people who work on this project, I get advanced access. And when I also make maps, I Google a lot. So this is just an example of Google Street View. And sometimes when I personally, sometimes I cycle to work and cycle home, and I look at the Google Street Maps data to see if the streets are good for cycling or walking or just driving. And why do I like maps? So I like maps because they give a sense of space. A few years back, I made this map called the Green Spaces of Metro Manila. And using the OpenStreetMap data, I just basically labeled green spaces such as forests, grass, nature reserves, parks, or meadows. And this gives a sense of space that, in terms of my city, Metro Manila, there's not much green spaces around. And of course, since this is just a simplified view of the green spaces of my city, some of my friends from the government made a different map. So this is the NDVI map, or the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index map. Basically shows how green the plants are in the area. And we can automatically correlate. You can see that this is a water reserve and this is a large forest. And this is actually an airport. So it's not really green because there's a lot of cement. But there's also down here, there's lots of actually green areas, but it's also uh, habitated space. But when you compare this to the population density map, we see that the least green areas of the city, for example, here towards the Port of Manila, are the most densely populated areas. Whereas the most green areas, for example, towards the northeast, are the least populated areas. So it gives us a sense of space, that how much of what certain thing we are looking at. For example, we are looking at the green spaces, and then we compare it with the population. So it automatically gives us an idea of what we see, what we experience. Although these are not automatically correlated, it just gives us a brief idea. For example, here's another set of maps. No, these are the night lights. So towards the left are maps derived from satellite data, and these show how bright the lights are in the evening. And then when you compare it to the roads from OpenStreetMap, you can see that the most densely lighted areas are also the most dense, has the most dense streets. No? And these are actually the main cities of the country. So this is Metro Manila, the one in the map earlier. And here is Cebu and somewhere here in Mindanao. And we see that we can actually compare them straight on. So besides maps giving a sense of space, these also give a sense of scale. And this is an example, they call this, when we teach maps, we always use the analogy of oranges. That when you have an orange, you can't automatically just lay that orange flat on the table. So you have to slice, you have to tear, you have to peel, you have to just like basically stretch other parts. So this is in the 3D space, it's a sphere, but it's an orange, but on the 2D space, it's a weird shape of orange piece. And this gives rise to problems in what we call projections. For example, this is what we usually see in our books. So this is our attempt of visualizing a 2D globe on a flat surface. And this is the face of a person when it's in that projection. But when we try to stretch this map's globe here, this is what happens to the face of the person. So it's not really realistic. No? And this also becomes interesting when we compare the sizes of different countries. Besides studying in the Philippines, I'm also studying in the University of Reading remotely. So that's in the UK. And it's on the other side of the globe. And sometimes when I look at these maps, I see that, oh, it's UK is so big and the Philippines is so small. But when you actually move these boundaries towards each other, you'll realize that the Philippines is not so small after all. Actually, when we look at the area or the space and then the boundaries and then the what do you call this, the coastlines of both countries, uh, actually Philippines can can be very big compared to other countries. So that's a sense of scale. But when you combine these, so maps give a sense of scale and a sense of space. Uh, I always look at these different road maps or railway maps. For example, this is a map of uh, the European railways. So this is UK and this is Europe, and the region is very much interconnected by the large region is very much interconnected by the railways. No, but when we look at the Philippines, there's not much. We realize that there's not much railways connecting the country. So this is a very small, dense area. Uh, that's where our MRTs and LRTs are located. And this is a very old railway. It's still operating. Sometimes it does have problems. But when you compare our railways compared to the whole world, it's just a small line. So in terms of scale, in terms of space, it's very much very small. And finally, maps can also give us a sense of movement. So this is data from GFS, I think, and this is the high waves, and this is just a normal movement of water towards the Western Pacific. I hope you can see it moving now. It's just like a wave motion. All right. So now I gave you a brief summary of maps. So maps give us a sense of scale, space, and movement. Now let's just talk about memes. It's very hard to talk about memes because it's a very cultural thing. It's a culture. They define it as a cultural unit of information spread by imitation. So it's a very old word actually, and it understanding memes or relating to memes that uh, depends from culture to culture. Sometimes my jokes won't be understood by my friends in the UK, and sometimes their jokes I don't understand. And when I was in Germany, people around me are laughing, and I don't understand what they're laughing about, and it's very cultural. And sometimes I feel like this person just pretending to be a very young person. It's very cultural. Sometimes when we try to imitate other countries, other cultures, or other people, sometimes you don't understand each other. But when you try to make it situational, for example, memes are very situational. I made this meme, let's say 5 years ago, and this got around 60,000 shares on Facebook. So it's either thinking about doing a master's degree and actually doing a master's degree, and people related to that very much. And then when I was starting my science journey, so I had to decide between science or social life. So sometimes memes are just stupid and funny, and it's a means for me to procrastinate, just like what most PhD students do. Now we move on to how we make our maps as memes. This is a map that I made a few years back, and it's recently making the rounds again in the Philippines. So there are 4,090 barangays. So barangay is a small unit of community in the Philippines named poblacion. And the thing is that there's a lot of poblations in the Philippines because it basically means city center. So it's like you're saying New York City Center, Metro Manila City Center. So that's why all of our all of the regions of the Philippines has poblacion. Sometimes I make stupid memes like this one. So if you wanted to know which one is water, which one is land, so the blue one is water and then the green is land. And take note that I use Comic Sans every now and then because it gets people talking, or it sometimes people just get irritated when you use Comic Sans. Remember when CERN actually this is 10 years ago when they published their results about the Higgs boson. They used Comic Sans and then people were angry. But the thing is, while people were angry, some people, it gets people talking about the results. So yes, they start to share these images of CERN. And hey, look, they're using Comic Sans. And I think a lot of my mentors in the university also use Comic Sans in their work, in their papers actually. So some people may be angry, but when they're angry and when they want to correct what you did, they inexplicably share your results. So it really depends on how you use these medium. Every now and then, I produce these kind of maps. So mga bagyo ng Agosto or tropical cyclones during August. And it just shows no every month how tropical cyclones move in the Philippines. And then when I use Comic Sans, people complain. But when they complain, they boost engagement and then they also share. So it gets the message across. All right. So enough about maps and memes. Let's talk about maps and meteorology. And maps are very helpful tool in meteorology. No? So when I started meteorology, I thought I would just be studying about equations, how precipitation forms, how clouds form. But it's very helpful understanding the sense of scale, space, and movement that these maps give us. A few years back, one of the volcanoes in the Philippines, the one that I showed earlier, Taal, erupted. So Taal is over here, no? It's a very small volcano. But when it erupted, it created a very large cloud, so pyrocumulus cloud. So this is a large cloud that generated its own weather. So besides thunderstorms and lightnings and rain, it also brought soot and ash across the country. So that's a 80-kilometer large cloud, and then it moved northwards. And besides these cloud maps, we also have how we relate clouds and lightning. This is so 3 years ago. So there's a large thunderstorm, and we can see no where the lightning is occurring. And then when we know where lightning is, usually we say where there's lightning, there's rain. So most probably this large area here, most probably is that's where rain is happening. And then also I said earlier that maps give us a sense of movement. And sometimes it's just nice to watch these how the atmosphere moves. So, for example, these rope clouds over here where two different air masses meet, and it's just moving, and it's nice to look at. And in terms of maps being so showing us a sense of movement, uh, this is uh, this is the Philippines again, and this is wind coming from the northeast, and we see how the wind moves across, around, and over the mountains of the Philippines. And every now and then, I show this map. This is what we call the Misery Index map from Earth.Now School, and it just basically shows how comfortable or how hot your region is. And whenever I share these maps, I just label it with init or hot, and then people start to share it. And then some people start talking about why it's hot in the Philippines. Because first we're near the equator, and then it's actually the summer, and it gives us an avenue to hook people in to talk about these things, whether or not they're science majors or just normal random people in the internet. All right. Sometimes when I have time, I just draw. So right now in the Philippines, it's very hot. So after showing the map earlier, I showed these drawings saying that we're currently in a monsoon break. And that's because of a high pressure area towards eastern parts of the country. And when there's high pressure, there's less rainfall and there's more sun coming in. So now we try to combine all of these three different things, and it's hard, as I said in the introduction. Because as I said, first maps can be technical, and also meteorology can also be technical, and memes is also very cultural and situational. For example, if I show this map in the to my fellow Filipinos, so this is tropical cyclone Jenny, and this is Jenny from Blackpink. So most probably it would be the Filipinos who would recognize what's happening in this map. But sometimes we can also take advantage of very universal memes and be ironic. So, for example, this dog is complaining about the heat, but keeps on saying that climate change isn't real. And we can get people to talk about this. And when I have lots of time, I convert the the official weather forecasts of our state weather bureau. So the tropical cyclone is somewhere here, for example, and then I just put it in an emoji map. And then people like this because it's very simple compared to very technical maps. And this is what I keep on saying to people who want to produce good figures or good maps. Good maps are like memes. If you need to explain, you can always do better. And this is one of my favorite books, Don't Be Such a Scientist, Talking Sentence in an Age of Style by Randy Olson. And he says that as scientists, one of our key problems in communicating is we want to be accurate and we want to be interesting. But sometimes we can't have both of them at the same time. Because when we want to be accurate, it gets to become too technical and not be a lot of people will understand it. But when we want to be interesting, we sacrifice a lot of accuracy. So that's one of our dilemmas. No? So scientists and science communicators face every single day with every communication exercise. It's accuracy and interest do not always go hand in hand. And even me as a scientist, I complain that a lot of people use technical words that I don't understand. It's hard. One time I was trying to create a map. So this is a map of tropical cyclones of the Philippines and then the Philippine Air Responsibility. I wanted to include everything. I wanted to include the track. I wanted to include the scale. I wanted to include the time. But when you start to include all of these technical details and all these accurate details, you start to lose the essence of what you want what you want to share. So I presented this to a friend of mine and I said, I want to make this map and I want to share it to people. The only thing that told me was, BA, what's your message? What do you want people to see in this map? So he said, never forget the message. And I kept thinking hard. And the message that I wanted to show here is that the Philippines is near what we call, besides being in the Pacific Rim of Fire, is we're near what we call the typhoon belt. So basically, it's just a lot of typhoons affecting the Philippines every year. So I tried to simplify this map into a combination of the density and tracks. And in just one look, you can see that this is the Philippines, and these are all the tropical cyclones that affected us since 1800s to 2018. So one look, you can immediately see what you're talking about. But sometimes we have to break our own rules. As I said earlier, no, good maps are like memes. You don't have to explain. So this is a recent movement by Ed Hawkins of the University of Reading. So this is what we call the climate stripes. And I usually present this to my students in environmental science and ask them, what do you see? What is this? What does this remind you of? And they just say, it's Netflix. To a non-technical person, you can just say that this is the trend of warming in the country, in the world in the previous 200 years. And a lot of people complain about this map actually because they say that it's too simple. Why would you want to share something that you need to explain when you can just include all of these numbers, all of these data, all of these scales? But I remember what Ed keeps on saying. He says that some people do actually like the simple version. And then when people start to ask about it, you can hook them in and then invite them to conversation about climate change. You can say that, okay, it's blue back then, it's red right now, it's hotter now. So you don't need all of these technical details sometimes. And when you hook them in, you can start talking about all of these things. So I think I'm almost at the end of my slides now. Okay. All right. So this is my last slide. So maps help us understand the world because they give us a sense of space, scale, and movement. So memes are stupid, funny, cultural, situational, but they are also relatable. And they also help us spread our message. And good maps are like memes. If you need to explain, you can always do better. But of course, you can always break our own rules because it can be conversation starter if you need to explain. And never, ever, ever forget your audience. And then never forget your message. And that's it for me today. So if you have questions, you can discuss it over chat now. And you can also contact me through my email or my Twitter handle.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Lee. That's a really great presentation. I think I learned a lot, and I think I see that you've tried to apply your own kind of understanding on how to communicate in a more generic, simpler, but also really engaging and entertaining way. Yeah, so I just want to encourage anyone in the audience to feel free to put in your questions in the chat so we can field these questions to BA. But for the meantime, we'll make this a bit more conversational and talk a little bit about the maps, means, and meteorology. Alicia, I think you put in the first question in there,
Yeah.
and maybe something that you can ask BA. And yeah.
Sure. Thank you, BA, for the very interesting and engaging presentation. So yeah, my question is something that draw from the initial introduction about your topic, which is you mentioned that when scientists try to communicate science through memes and other means, there will be some compromises or there will be some sacrifices. So my question would be, so the reality is that we are all familiar with the norm that scientists try to communicate everything in the most accurate language, which can be too much for most people. So can you please give us some examples, or you can just go back to some of your slides to elaborate how to compromise without taking away the precision and accuracy aspects of the science, and where is the line? Thank you.
Oh, of course. Thank you very much for this question. And as we discussed, this is a very, very hard line or hard boundary to cross, especially since a lot of people look at scientists or agencies as officials, and some people who can't be relatable because you have to be precise, we have to be accurate. And this has been a running problem, especially I have friends in the State Weather Bureau, and one of their not really complaints, but they say that they have to be precise, they have to be accurate, and they have to be official. So they have to be an authority. And me personally, I have a lot of, as a professor, I have a lot of academic freedom that I can make all of these things very stupid or fun. But yes, it's a hard line. It's a hard boundary that sometimes I'm not even sure when or how to cross. No? Um, but the thing is, as I said earlier, we have to keep in mind of our message and our audience, because it's not practical to have everyone as our audience. We have to be selective about who we want to talk to. Because, for example, when we want to talk to disaster risk agencies, we have to be very precise, we have to be accurate, we have to be complete. But when I'm talking to a common person, I can do away with some of this accuracy. So, where is the line? It really depends on who you're talking to, and it really depends on what you want to say. Because, for example, if I want to say that tomorrow it will be rainy, do not do your laundry. Well, that's what I can tell a common person about. But if there's a tropical cyclone, I can say to a disaster agency that by tomorrow, the tropical cyclone might make landfall at 6 p.m. We have to prepare, and we have to include, of course, our how sure are we about our confidence in this forecast, and what kind what what other caveats we have. So it really depends. And what I hear recently is that we can't satisfy everyone. We can't give one message that fits all. So
Yeah.
that's it. It's a hard line. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's quite hard, BA, and I think I quite agree with you. Is to always remember the kind of the message and the audience and how you probably communicate really depends on that context, and it is situational. And a quite interesting point that I just want to pick up on is that it's hard to have a one size fits all for message for everyone. But just trying to put in a bit of a, I guess, not a controversial topic, but we know that there's this kind of movement from the WMO about early warnings for all. And I think it's a really good initiative, but I think that's creates a lot of challenge. And how do we communicate? How do we reach to all? And especially, I guess, with people who might not understand all the scientific terms. And I think it's this initiative that we've seen that you've been doing, trying to explain in a way that is understandable for others. So Perhaps as an encouragement, have you ever had any kind of feedback from people in social media about the things that you do? Have you have any kind of like things that people say, hey, thanks, BA, for doing this. It helps us understand a little bit more. Maybe a bit of examples in that aspect, if any. I'm assuming there are, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
There's actually been a lot. For example, I've tried one of the recent questions in my, let's say, Facebook and Twitter is people ask, why don't we talk about high pressure areas more often? That's why I made this drawing that these are high pressure systems and these are low pressure systems. I tried to simplify versus how I teach this in a meteorology class. So when I teach in a meteorology class, these are not the figures that I would use. But when I talk to other people, I'll try to draw these things. In terms of feedback, yeah, some people appreciate it a lot. No? But some people, as I said in my Ed Hawkins uh, discussion, that some people would don't like things to be too simple and they complain. That's why sometimes I make disclaimers, I write more explanations. And the thing is, I try my best to keep explanations to, let's say, Twitter, which has a 280 character limit. And it's hard to keep everything in that one single thread or tweet.
I guess that's a challenge if you have such little spaces to make sure that
Yeah.
every character counts, right? And that makes us think about, what's meaningful and what's the message that we want to put across. So I'm just gonna
Mhm.
ask some of the questions that people have
Sure.
put in the chat. But and again, dear audience, feel free to put in more questions so we can have a really great discussion coming along. So from Ray, he was asking that, do you think that Filipinos in general would have a good understanding about the use of maps? What do you think is the baseline of, I guess you're talking to a Filipino, audience. You think what's their baseline of understanding maps in the Philippines?
I'm not sure. I don't think I'm the right person to answer that. But based on different discussions, a lot of Filipinos are very directional. So there's this cultural thing where we just point like that. We use our mouse to point. And then sometimes just use that to, oh, there's a cloud coming here. Something like that. So in terms of if Filipinos have a good understanding about maps, I can't say because the only people I have interactions with in map discussions are my students. So maybe it's a good question to ask others or social media.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a good point that you point out. So I guess having a bit of understanding of your audience would also be quite helpful. And
Yeah.
maybe somebody else in the audience, you can answer that question. Feel free to put it in the chat. Um, yeah. How about the use of color? What's kind of your strategy there? So Jason's asking, from your experience, how can we use it to make the figures more engaging and interactive? Is there a specific template that you use, or just based on how you feel during the day? What's your kind of like decisions on using of colors?
Well, in terms of colors, I just avoid what we call the jet color scheme, the color scheme that goes from blue to yellow to orange to red, because I just try to use the monochromatic color schemes because it pops out and you can print it in black and white, and sometimes it's color blind friendly. But to make the figures more engaging and interactive, I Google a lot and I search about color. I ask and I think I look at the color theories on design. But sometimes it's not up to me. So we can ask our friends from the design, from our designer friends and our journalist friends. So you can ask people uh, which colors do they like.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a important thing as well, because I think colors can also attract attention. Like the map
Yeah,
that you showed earlier about red and black, it kind of just gives that, it evokes some emotion as well, doesn't it? So I think that's, I think
for example, this one. Yeah.
yeah, this one, it's like, oh my gosh, like I can already feel the heat in the Philippines, even though it's winter here in New Zealand. So it kind of evokes that emotion. I think it's good use. It would totally be different if this was like in, I don't know, like a cooler color, or if it was in grayscale. So I think
Mhm.
that's a really good use of color in this sense.
And sometimes when you use too much color, for example, in this map here, it gets too confusing. And that's why I said I tend to stay towards monochromatic colors. That's why not too many colors, not too confusing, not too harsh to the eyes.
Well, and the other thing that I wanted to pick up on is I've heard it a few times when you're talking, giving your presentation, is that it's about conversations. It's a
Yeah.
conversation starter. So what's your take on this? Like, how, I guess in terms of getting people to understand more about meteorology or more about understanding the weather, um, why do you think it's important to start these conversations? And maybe you can give some examples of some conversation that has started from creating these maps, memes, and sharing it in social media.
Yeah, actually, when we talk about conversations, one of the parts that people tend to forget is that when you converse, you also have you're not just talking. You also have to listen, and you have to listen to what people are asking, what people need. For example, when I talk about the weather, and right now there's no tropical cyclone; it's just hot because of the high pressure area. The thing that most people are concerned about is when will I do my laundry? So you ask them, what's important here right now about, or I will be cycling later tonight. Will it be rainy? So you'll have to be more perceptive. You have to listen. You have to be more empathetic. But when a tropical cyclone, say, is going to make landfall, people are very concerned is, will it rain in my area? Will it be windy in my area? And when? So they ask. And when they ask, you have to listen, and then you have to craft your answers or responses based on what their questions are. As we said earlier, no, it's not just a one size fits all message. It's a very, very specific thing for very specific people.
Yeah. So in terms of like, I guess the severity of weather, because you've shown us that there's a lot of cyclones that happens and that passes through the Philippines. Is there ever a time that it's not a good time to put up memes? Is there a kind of a, like
Yeah, yeah.
a fine line as well regarding timing? And do you have any kind of suggestions on this topic?
Of course, in terms of tropical cyclones, there's always the aftermath, And usually I try to avoid social media after tropical cyclones make landfall, because that's when we start to see the effects, and we start to see what the people need in terms of response and then rehabilitation. So that's not a good time to put up memes. Uh, I'm not sure if people know about this, about there's this meme from Parasite where this person was very happy that it was raining because it cleared up the sky, but there's this other person who's very sad because it flooded his house. So again, you have to be very perceptive. You have to listen. You have to see what the people are feeling, what the people are experiencing, what they're asking for. So, for example, after a tropical cyclone makes landfall, the next question of people would be, when would it stop raining? And that's when become more precise, become more accurate, and stop talking about memes. You start talking about tropical cyclones. It's like you hook them first with the weird and situational and funny stuff, but when it's actually happening already, you have to listen and discuss and converse.
Yeah. What I'm also hearing is like people are really interested about the impacts of the weather, right? So when do I need to do laundry? When is it gonna stop raining? Perhaps because it's gonna affect how I will travel. In a sense, do you think have you done kind of any work on helping communicate this impact? So for example, if we talk about high winds or maybe storm surges or these kind of things, have you done any work on helping people understand some of the hazards of severe weather?
Well, back then, before I started my PhD, I was part of the nationwide operational assessment of hazards. And one of the things that we were doing was, first is to map all of these different hazards. And then besides that is to talk to people about these different hazards. So I haven't done that kind of communication work in, let's say, 5 years. So I have tried back then, not recently because I just finished my PhD. So I'm going to start projects in the future, hopefully.
So also I guess because you are on social media a lot, and I think one way is like I guess a lot of scientists want to know how to make social media work for them to help communicate their science. Are there any tips towards the use of social media? Are there particular platforms that you're more in tune to, or yeah?
Hmm. Um, well, I remember I attended when I was in Reading, I attended a course on how to use social media to your advantage as an academic. Uh, hmm, how to be more in tune.
I think
Well,
just
I
following
always
up,
say,
it's uh,
yeah, I keep on saying you have to be perceptive and you have to listen to the people, to what they want, what they're asking for. Sometimes you do have to maintain a professional image, so you have to be careful in terms of when you write and when you talk, because people will really come back at you with what you've written online. So it's like you have different personas. So you have a persona that, for example, me, I'm BA as a professor, BA as an academic writing papers, and BA as a social media person. So that's why I keep on saying disclaimers that all of these opinions and are mine. They do not represent the institution I work with.
And I was like, I guess linking up to that, Danielle just put up a question just right on topic. So yeah, so putting out your memes and ideas on social media may elicit different conversations, including those that may not necessarily agree with yours, or even just plain negative comments, or just being controversial, or just putting you down. So how do you handle those really negative comments, or the people that are just in a sense haters, right? So we'll always have some haters on social media. So how do you handle those?
Happens, especially since actually, I think I have 11,000 followers on Twitter right now. And it happens that not a lot, not all everyone would agree with what you say. And as I said, for example, some people will contradict what you say or just plain say bad things. Well, you said earlier that I'm always online. Actually, I'm not. There are times when I do need to take a break, to log out and just to not take things personally. Of course, every time I read these comments, I first take these personally. So that's the time when I should log out and not be defensive. Because they say when you are emotional, you tend to say things that you might regret. So it's very helpful that in terms of the internet, you can always put away your phone, take a walk, and then just breathe and then think about, are they attacking you, or are they attacking your comments, or are they discussing? Are they asking? Do they want more? Or is this an opportunity to invite conversation?
I think that's a really positive spin to it, because yeah, sometimes these comments may be negative, but actually they might start conversations, and you might not be the one that needs to respond. Maybe some of your
Yeah.
followers, they're the ones who respond, and that initiates the conversation. And if that leads to some learning, I guess it's not all too negative in a sense. Yeah. So I guess one question for me is, what made you want to be out there? As scientists, we do have kind of this decision that we can stick to our research, put our heads down, do the research. But what motivated you to communicate, to share, to be on social media? What's your kind of motivation to do this and keep doing this?
Well, I think it's because of our field, disaster risk reduction, meteorology, the weather. It's a thing that every people experience every day. You look out the window, you see clouds, you see rain, and sometimes people just wonder what's happening. And I keep doing this because we say that weather is small talk. I think it's time that it's not small talk anymore, because it's what happens every day. The winds keep moving, the clouds keep shifting, and to help people understand what's happening. That's uh, that's uh, that's one of my missions in life, to help people understand the world a little bit better.
Thanks, because I think that's as a scientist myself, I think it's the curiosity that gets us to keep doing the research. But I guess helping others find that curiosity and understanding is a way to be able to share a part of what we do to the rest of our communities. So there's a comment from Alicia. Maybe there is, I guess, an avenue for a meme-focused science communicator. But no, kidding aside, um, um, is there a growing field of science communication? Are you helping your peers in the professional science communicators? What is the field like in the Philippines? What are we seeing in terms of science communication?
Mhm. That's a good thing you did mention that because it's a growing field, as you said. Back then, let's say 10 years ago, there's not much people who do science communication. But right now, there are journalists, science journalists, and there are even science offices. For example, in our office, in our institute in UP, we have a small team doing science communication. So we have journalists there writing up our work that's more relatable to other people. And sometimes it gets put up on national media, so news articles and so yes, I do work with professional science communicators, and a lot of these are actually close friends of mine. And it's good, no, that we have our these people close by or these people as friends because as Marian earlier mentioned, we can't do everything on our own. So sometimes you have other people to answer the questions for you. And actually, I'm very much afraid of of traditional media because sometimes they just quote my tweets without permission, and I ask them to take them down. What I do is I talk to my science journalist friends, and then and then we discuss how we could put a spin to this that is more understandable, more relatable. So an emergent field. Compared to 10 years ago, there's not much science communicators. Now there's a lot in the Philippines. And it's very helpful or handy to keep them close by because you can't do everything on your own.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good response, and knowing that we do this, I guess together. We don't, we have to look at the expertise of others and help communicate as well. You mentioned a little bit about traditional media. So do you do any collaboration with them as well to help, kind of communicate some of this science? And do you think there's potential for future to mix, new media and traditional media towards creating, I guess, better stories and understanding to help us understand weather a bit more?
Well, maybe not recently, but back then I think traditional media invite us to write articles, pop sci articles. But of course, it's very hard to write pop sci articles on top of your daily job. So as I said earlier, I have friends in traditional media, and instead of me writing all these pop sci articles, I put myself out there if they ask if they need someone to help explain or someone to understand. In fact, just last week I just did an interview with New ASEAN about tropical cyclones. So it's good that you have these people as close contacts or friends. And you have to put yourself out there. And as much as I'm scared of these interviews, I try my best to converse with people. Uh, Sometimes you really have to go out and talk to people. And sometimes you have to talk to people who will talk to people for you.
Yeah. So with your, I guess, yeah, just a few more questions from me, but I think one of the things that I'm
Yeah.
quite interested at is your, I guess, audience. How old are they? Or would you know, are they young? Are they old? Or do you get a range of people? Because I think one of the questions that people often ask us as researchers, how do you communicate to the younger people? I don't do TikTok, so, but maybe is it time that we do? Or yeah, so give us an idea of the audience that you're talking with, and if you're reaching the younger audience, and if not, how do you think we can um uh yeah reach them?
I don't do TikTok also. In terms of my audience, I'm not sure. I actually don't know what my audience is. But for example, here, I try to tailor what I talk about depending on who I think the audience is. sometimes I get to talk to high school students. Sometimes I get to talk to college students. Or sometimes I get to talk to Facebook where everyone is there. I remember I did a talk a few weeks back when people were complaining, or what you're talking about is too technical. And I said, it's because the people who invited me are college students. So this is what they were asking about. So sometimes the thing about social media is that everyone is here. And as you said earlier, there's not one message fits all. And that's when, as I said, conversation happens because people start to ask if you are too technical or too intellectual. Yeah. In terms of my audience, I'm not sure the age range. But for
Yep.
example, when I post about the weather and then I try to post about the weather in the most simplest terms. And then people will have follow-up questions. And then that's when we get to talk about our science more.
Thanks. So I guess that's one thing that I wanted to ask as well, because once you post something, you're putting yourself out there, and then questions come. So do you always answer these questions? Do you take time to answer everyone, or what's your kind of, I guess, feedback, and how much of you do you give into these responding to these questions?
Well, first of all, if it's something that I can answer without Googling, I answer. If it's something that I cannot answer right away and or is not my expertise, I start to become honest and say I can't answer that right now. Maybe someone else can. Because you don't have to answer everything and you don't have to know everything. So you have to be honest with yourself and with the audience if there are things that you cannot answer. For example, earlier there's a question about the Filipino perception on maps, and I said I can't answer that right now because I don't. So you have to be honest when you don't know.
Thanks, V. I really find this kind of talk quite refreshing because, I can see your honesty and also your willingness to share of your experiences to help to connect to audiences that might be, like you said, you might not know who they are, but you know that you need to speak more simply so that you can reach a wider audience. And I really want to thank you for that refreshing kind of, like you said at the beginning, you don't want this to be too technical, and I wanted this also
Yeah.
to be quite casual, and listening to your responses to the questions from the audience and questions from me and Alicia. I think we've learned a lot about your experience as a science communicator. And I do want to kind of highlight some of the things that you said. And I think it's really about, having that kind of perspective to listen and to have
Mhm.
conversations. I think this is a key thing for science communication, especially relating it to this webinar series that we're running, where we are wanting to get more involvement with citizens and citizens doing science, especially in the weather space. I think there is that kind of question again, who is my audience and who is my message and how do I connect with them? And it may be through the maps that you've shown, the memes that you've shown, and it connects with how we want to reach out for them to learn a little bit more about meteorology and eventually about high impact weather and how we can prepare for these events. What I really, if there's one key takeaway from me from this talk is what you said about memes and maps. If it takes time to explain that image, then it needs more work. And I think that's something that not just for the maps and the memes, but I think um, in communication in general, if we have to be quite reflective of if it's not clear enough, if it takes more words, if it takes more effort to communicate some of this science, then maybe perhaps there's some more work to done, not to just dumb the things down, to make it simpler and understandable. And then those conversations start, and then those questions come, and then that's where we can have conversations about doing science and help people understand about the many kind of really complex stuff that we are encountering now through weather, climate change. And yeah, so just really want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking time to speak to us. And I know you're not in citizen science, but I think your your experience in communicating on using social media and using these tools and methods of maps and memes has been quite useful. And hopefully our audience from the Yes community and the HIWeather community can take something from your presentation and this conversation that we have had today. And I just want to thank everyone for their time as well, for coming online and asking those questions and being part of this webinar session. So I guess, yeah, thanks again. And maybe Alicia, if there's anything else that we'd want to know or.
Yeah.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you very
So
much.
yeah.
Oh, you're feel free to talk a little bit before we
Yeah,
officially
as
end the session today.
as I said earlier, I've been avoiding giving talks to Yes for the longest time. But yeah, it's time for me to give back now. So that's why I gave this talk today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had
Thank you
fun.
for this refreshing topic. As you said, although you didn't directly work with citizen science, but actually you have a way, or you're promoting a way that's getting more citizens to get involved in science, which might eventually help with the scientists to get a lot of concept across. So that's very relatable issue. And also it is a very, very easy way to open up the discussion and to get people more curious and interested in science. And then, or more accurate information can be followed on afterwards. Yeah, so thank you all for coming. Next week, so right now we're not entirely sure, but tentatively we will have a talk in 1 week by a Ghana meteorologist, Maureen. But yeah, let me make sure. It might be postponed, but we will keep you updated. But thank you for coming and thank you for engagement. Have a nice day or have a nice night.